Okay, so look, I'm a show
don't know what
monkey.
that is?
I read what they write for me.
You'd have to.
I don't know what
No, you don't.
OnlyFans is.
No.
And I'm not covering myself in chocolate.
You didn't know
I'm
what
not doing
Tinder
that.
was yesterday, and Tinder's mainstream. You didn't know that.
The funnier line was the one they refused to use, which was I'd cover my neighbor.
Yeah.
That was funny. They said, oh, you can't say that.
Well, you got
I
no
just
neighbor
said it.
to the right, so we're only working 50-50. And by the way, how about the marketing people who should be shipped out to sea for coming up with these stupid days? Really?
There's at least 3 to 4 days every single day. If you have a calendar, you can see all these things. Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. We're about 2 minutes late. In today's episode, James Harden takes the court, Aaron Rodgers sounds confident, and baseball owners want to delay the season. But we begin today with the college football playoff rankings. The top 4 are the same as they've been for a while: Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Ohio State. Just behind them is Texas A&M. But let's look further down for this story. Florida, which lost at home to a 3-5 LSU team, dropped just 1 spot from 6 to 7. Meanwhile, undefeated Cincinnati dropped to 9, even though they didn't even play. Cincinnati is behind 3 two-loss teams: Iowa State, Florida, and Georgia. Wilbon, does the committee have it right?
The committee looks like a stooge. Seriously, the committee looks stupid and mean or out of touch. Like they just said, there's a pandemic. We're not even going to pay attention this week. It just looks like you just I want to walk in the room and just look at everybody, just look around and say, really? Do you think the rest of us are as stupid as you people are? Because really, Florida, see, we got TVs at our house, and we just watched Florida lose for the second time this year. So either you're stupid or you're just slavishly devoted to the SEC, which it is, and then the ACC after that. And so they're scared of Ohio State and what the Big Ten might do to them, so they have to sort of keep Ohio State propped up. It angers me, as you can tell, that the committee is this dumb and out of touch.
So what it says to me, if Florida at home loses and they're a 23.5-point favorite and they only drop 1, that says to me that Notre Dame can lose and stay in because they'd be losing to a better team. That even suggests to me, Mike, that if Clemson loses and that's their second loss, they might stay in. Although I'm perfectly happy if somebody drops out and Texas A&M gets in, because they've got a good loss. They lost to Alabama. You cannot get a better loss than losing to Alabama.
It's nice that you're so kind and esoteric about this, and you want to assign point values to what the committee does. I want the committee shipped out. Seriously. Tony, it's insulting what the committee did yesterday, what they announced. I mean, the Florida thing alone, you just want to stop and say, I'm sorry. Are you people awake? You want us to believe that this is the right ranking of these teams? So you can go and be esoteric and nuanced if you want. I'm not bothering with that.
No, that's
Seriously.
fine. But let me get to one thing that did bother me, okay? And I read this. Pat Forty wrote a great piece in Sports Illustrated, and he killed the committee. He killed them. And he killed Iowa State in particular. He said Iowa State lost head-to-head to Louisiana. They're ranked way over
like
Louisiana.
9 spots.
Louisiana then lost. The only loss was to Coastal Carolina, which has no losses. Coastal Carolina is behind Iowa State, and Coastal Carolina beat Louisiana and BYU, which were undefeated prior to that. The one thing I think the committee got right is USC. They're not putting USC in this thing.
No,
USC is 5-0, and 3 of their wins are against bad teams in their late
Tony,
wins.
you know what the problem for the committee is? Football's about 20 years behind basketball when it comes to smaller schools. With a basketball team, you get one great player and you can change the dynamic of March. You actually can. In football, you can't do that yet. But Tony, it's coming. And I understand this is a different year. The pandemic has made it such that a lot of Power 5 programs are a non-factor. And you have little schools like Coastal Carolina that pop up. But Tony, I'm not going to say it's trending yet, but it's coming. And the committee, whether it recognizes it, they're not paying any attention. Let me stay angry and get to James Harden, who was back on the court for the Rockets last night. Harden played 21 minutes, scored 12 points on 3 of 10 shooting. And after the game, head coach Stephen Silas said Harden looked good. And today Harden said he felt good. but of course declined to address his own trade demands. Tony, how did Harden look to you?
Looked a bit chunky, actually, to me. Kendrick Perkins, who weighs about 400 pounds, said that Harden looked like him with a wig on. So it looked like he had gained that COVID-19. Yeah, it looked like he'd gained that. So, look, he's a great player, and he can score on anyone, and he's going to look better as the season goes on. I want to commend Houston, and particularly Stephen Silas, who was doing the exact right thing, keeping his head down and his mouth shut and putting this guy out on the court. Because there's a story in ESPN that says that Harden is a complete prima donna and is late for all meetings and angers everybody and gets his way all the time. And if you're Harden, maybe you want to get out on the court so that teams don't think that it's counterproductive to get you. So teams think you are cooperative, and maybe they'll trade for you and get you out of there like you want to be.
We've seen the best of James Harden. James Harden ain't going to be the best player on any team that wins a championship or gets to a championship or gets close to a championship. James Harden is what he is. He's one of the great scorers of all time. End of sentence, end of paragraph. Now, you can train for James Harden if you want. If you've got others who bring out the best in him for another year or two, and they're damn good themselves. But the picture painted of Harden in that piece, Tony, is something that a lot of people have known. Harden ain't dedicated himself to the game like LeBron James on off days necessarily and off season moments. Like, I mentioned LeBron, like Russell Westbrook, like Chris Paul, like guys who everybody knows, oh my God, these guys are dedicated to the last drop at getting better, even on any single off day and working with younger players and doing all the things they need to do. And this piece says what a lot of people have thought, that James Harden ain't into that. And so that it's fine. Harden wouldn't be the first NBA star not into that. But if you think that Harden is just going to get on Houston and make them great like they were a couple of years ago and that close to winning the championship, I don't believe that at all. Houston ought to want to get as much as they can for James Harden and get him out of Dodge.
I'm sure they do. The piece points out that Chris Paul and Harden didn't get along, and Russell Westbrook and Harden didn't get along. And you talk about the places he wants to go. I don't know why why Brooklyn would trade for him. They've already got Kyrie Irving, who's enough for 12 people to have to handle. And when you say Philadelphia, you'd trade Ben Simmons, I don't know why Houston would want Ben Simmons if they have John Wall. So I don't know how that works, but Harden obviously wants to get out. Let's move on. Bob Nightingale writes in USA Today that Major League Baseball owners want all players vaccinated before they start the season, which they would delay until May and then could shorten to 140 games or fewer. Baseball players want all 162 games and full pay. And they say last season they proved they could obey the protocols. Wilbon, whose side do you lean towards?
They proved they could obey the protocols. Like the first couple of weeks, half the games were canceled. What are you talking about? What are you paying attention to? I'm squarely in a place I never am, on the side of baseball owners. So you mean to tell me the players aren't going to care as a union? I'm not going to get to individual players, but as a union, as an entity, vaccine, what happened to health and safety? If the owners said to the players in baseball, no, we don't want you to have the vaccine, let's go play, the players would scream bloody murder and go the other way because all they want to do is fight with the owners, and all the owners want to do is fight with the players. 140 games is not enough. You can't make 90% of your salary and perhaps guarantee your own union safety, your union members? Please.
So my feeling is that everybody should get vaccinated. You should want to get vaccinated. Yes. And if you can get vaccinated by April, shorten spring training the way the NBA and the NHL are doing, and go play the season. And that's how I feel.
After being vaccinated.
What is the problem here that the baseball players would jump the line? Pro sports jumps the line on things medical all the time and nobody cares. So go out, play 162, and the way you do it, you have expanded rosters. You play every day if you have to. You play the 7-inning doubleheaders. I don't see why that's a problem. Oddly enough, this is one of the few times that I think I side with the players. Because it seems to me health and safety are very important, but as you always say in the NFL, you don't believe them about health and safety.
No.
I'm not sure I believe the baseball owners this time. I think it's about money. I think they want to shorten the season to not have to pay that much because They can't get enough fans in the stands. They can't make concession money, and they would rather push off the season until enough people get vaccinated that there's 25 or 30,000 people there.
But it's not that many games.
So we disagree.
It's not that many games. It's 140 or 140 plus. It's a 162-game schedule. What are we talking about here? I'm not a math major, neither were you, but it's 20 games.
I'm saying you can get all 162 in, and if it means that you have to put the playoffs and the World Series in a neutral, warm weather site, that's what they did this year.
You don't
and
need
it was
to
fine.
do that again.
It was fine with me.
Take the damn vaccine.
Let's take a break.
Stop whining.
Stop screaming. Let's take a break. Coming up,
scream.
Aaron Rodgers sounds very positive on the Packers. Too positive?
And Roger Federer sounded even more uncertain than we.
Tier Whiskey, part of Happy Hour.
Time to don the lexicon, and what's the word? Word up. What's first?
Aaron Rodgers sounds blank about the Packers.
He sounds jacked up. Here are the quotes that he said on the Pat McAfee show. Quote, "We're playing great football. Now we can say it. We're having a lot of success on offense," unquote. That's pretty good considering he hates the GM and the coach for drafting Jordan Love. He's a guy who always told people to relax. He's a rather subdued fella. So this sounds really amped up by Aaron Rodgers. And by the way, Mike, I've got him as the MVP. I got Patrick Mahomes as the best player, but I've got Rodgers who's working with less as the MVP. Here's Rodgers, 39 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, Mike, plus 35. Here's Mahomes, 33-5, plus 28. And since they lost to Tampa Bay and they're 4-0 and averaging 38 points a game, he's got 13 touchdowns and no picks.
Listen, if he can't beat the Bears in their rematch, then he can't be the MVP. Sorry. He's got to sweep them to be the MVP. He sounds all kumbaya. I mean, you said he hates his coach and his GM. He sounds pretty good there. He sounds like they might go out and, raise one together somewhere in greater Green Bay. I mean, it doesn't sound like he's angry. You said he's going to hate the coach. It's not going to work. He hates the GM, blah, 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 blah.
I said that.
He doesn't hate anybody. He's saying peace and love. He's saying peace and love. What are you talking about?
You know who I don't hate?
Who?
I don't hate the College Football Ranking Committee. You do.
Yeah, I do.
What's
Today
next?
I do.
Roger Federer's award speech was blank.
Was foreshadowing. He got this award as the greatest athlete in Switzerland in the last 70 years, and he made a speech.
Who
and I wondered,
up in that, by the way?
Yeah, why did they cut it off at 70? Did they find out Babe Ruth was Swiss? Here are the people he was up against. Stan Wawrinka and Martina Hingis, and then
that's it.
Yeah, and then some bicycle rider. Hey, look, everybody knows that Switzerland is not known for its athletes. It's known for private numbered bank accounts and Heidi and Swiss Miss hot chocolate, which for all I know is manufactured in New Jersey.
What is that kid, Matty Nikkanen, the downhill kid? Wasn't he Swiss? Isn't.
I thought he was
still
Finnish.
Like 40 years old. He's Finnish. You're right.
I thought he was from Finland.
I was at the Winter Olympics. I can't even remember.
He says if his career ends now, he's good with it. He's 39 years old. Maybe he gets to 40, but it's probably over. Probably over.
You know what his award speech was? It was happy trails. Happy trails to Roger Federer. What? He's done. It's time to be done. The next number is 40. Not everybody's time to be TB12. Federer is if he's not the GOAT, he is right there, and you can argue
he's close.
He is the GOAT. He's in the discussion. So this is happy trails.
Right.
We're going to do this one day soon where Federer just says, I'm done. What a great life Federer has had, is having, and will have. Sayonara.
Do you like Swiss Miss hot chocolate? I think it's really good. Eat your words, Wilbon. Let's take one last break. Still to come, if the prompter ever moves, Duke is ready to get back out onto the court tonight. Is it a big game for the Blue Devils?
And we have a new all-time wins leader in women's college basketball. How many majors how many slam wins does Martina Hingis have? I'm going to say 11. Is that too many?
She doesn't have as many as Federer.
Rigged. Favoritism. Bias.
What are we talking about here? Oh, okay, the college football playoff. Good. Certainly no sports talk shows of competitive banter. No, definitely the college football playoff with this battle. Rita Kives, Tim Cowlishaw, Kevin Blackistone, Mr. Bob Ross. Let's go. The latest rankings of the college football playoff look just like every ranking of the college football playoff. Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, Florida dropped the whole one spot after a loss. Two lost teams are way ahead of undefeateds in this ranking. Pat Forty for SI today says it's favoritism and rigged for power programs. Our Bill Plaschke wrote up today USC is being disrespected. Do with that what you want. The debate about best teams or best resumes goes on. Tim Calishaw, around the horn to you. Is this legit? Is this rigged? Or just the way it has to be in a season like this?
All these complaints are legit. I think when you see the two lost teams stacked up ahead of undefeated Cincinnati, it's the committee telling Cincinnati there is no scenario, there is nothing that can happen that we will ever allow you to go be one of the top four and play in that. And when you look at little things like Iowa State now jumping up with two losses, they lost to Louisiana by 13 points, by 17 points. They're 13 spots ahead of Louisiana, which only has one loss. There's a lot of little things that say the group of five teams are never going to have a prayer. Now, most of it isn't going to matter if the favorites win, but if you're going to have these rankings, they ought to make sense.
Okay, so you would say favoritism. You would say rigged. Kevin Blackistone, would you?
Absolutely, and you can throw bias in there, but we all understand this for the reasons that Tim laid out. The Power Five is the Power Five for a very real reason. And you look at what happened to Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati hasn't played since before people sat down to eat turkey for Thanksgiving, and they still slipped a point despite being undefeated. But the last time we saw them, they had to come back to beat a 5-3 UCF team as well. So there is that. This is not going to change. It creates great argument. The arguments are almost ridiculous because we know that these are the conferences that rule the roost, especially the SEC. And you look at Ohio State in the Big Ten, 5-0. The Big Ten had the idea, you know what, if you don't play 6 games, you're not getting in. And they looked at the end of the day and said, forget that. They're getting in. They're the best shot we get.
You're talking about ruling the roost. Where are the Chanticleers? That's another team to throw in this. Bob Ryan, I'll bring you in here. Seems like Calishaw and Blackistone are awfully blasé. Oh, it's rigged. It's favoritism. But it's a good debate. Well, if the debate is this is rigged, do you even have a debate or should it just be scrapped? Go ahead.
Rigged is a loaded word. I don't want to go near it right now. Now, the fact of the matter is that we shouldn't even be having this discussion. Just table it for another year. No playoff. I said before the season it was going to be a convoluted season. It's all going to be, and it turned out to be exactly that. It's pointless. I'm not going to even recognize my diplomatic recognition whoever wins. Now, that said, number 1 is correct. Number 4 is correct, and 2 and 3 are going to settle that one Saturday night. They got the best 4 teams. Everybody else is jockeying for position for bowl games that may or may not be played. It's just irrelevant discussion. They can argue all they want. They have the right 4 teams, and that's all we all really should care about, who are neutrals.
And Mina Kimes.
Well, Tony, in the words of the cinematic classic, Bring It On, this is not a democracy, it's a cheerocracy. By which I mean, the committee is rooting for the Power 5 teams to prevail, same as it's always been. But there's nothing new about any of this. It's only magnified by the fact that these teams are playing fewer games, so it's more obvious. There's no logical justification for undefeated Cincinnati to be behind the likes of Florida. You can tie yourself up in knots trying to explain it, but we all know the game, and it's always going to be the game until they expand the playoffs. Now, you can argue against expanding the playoffs because we'd have lopsided games, but there's going to be a Cincinnati, there's going to be a UCF. This will be the case until the end of time because 4 teams is a small number of teams.
If larger shoes were tied in knots, maybe Florida would not be having this problem, by the way. Tim Calishaw, I know you always drill down on it's the best team. The job is for the committee to pick the best team, and therefore there's no debate on who those 4 teams are, in your opinion.
There isn't right now, but what happens? I do wonder what happens Saturday if Notre Dame loses by 30 points to Clemson. Are they still one of the 4 best teams? And then you're in that situation where are they really going to bump Iowa State up if they beat Oklahoma? I don't know what they do if that happens.
Does anybody think it was a missed opportunity, though? I mean, I've been saying this for 9 months. This was a year where you should throw everything out. And if you had a brainstorm where you wanted a bigger playoff, this is the year to try it. Well, maybe this could have been the year to try it, but they didn't go with it. Instead, they went with what you're telling me is favoritism, rigged bias. we'll move on. This sweet step-back three from James Harden last night. Other than that, it looked like a preseason game for Harden and everybody else because it was. But today, Tim McMahon, ESPN, James Harden and the Rockets are at a breaking point. He's going to act up he's never heard no before, a former staff member for the team was quoted as saying in that article. And an former assistant said, I don't blame James, I blame the organization. He did what they allowed him to do. So you had some huge quotes in that article. Today, Harden met with media, and he's moving forward with playing. And another report that came out, he hasn't even talked to the GM. They haven't had one conversation yet. What happens now, Kevin Blackistone?
Well, what should happen now is that the Rockets, with a new organization, a new coach, ought to look at the last 8 years in which I think James Harden has been there and say, you know what? This is over. This experiment is over. He gave us a great run. We had a high water mark a few years ago. We won 65 games with Chris Paul. It looked like we had a real shot there. That didn't work out. We brought in Westbrook. You know what? That didn't work out. We got to go in a new direction. But I don't think there's anything you can do right now with James Harden there to fix the things around him. That's what you've tried to do ever since he's been there. And that's what someone is going to try and do if they should acquire him. And I think that that's what the Rockets should do. They should look to relieve James Harden of his duties in Houston.
Tim, when you read that McMahon piece, no one's ever said no to James in this franchise. And I mean, he's beyond blame here?
Oh, no, he's not beyond blame, but I mean, the organization is the one that let him get away with it. When you read that and you think about all his magnificent scoring, and we've seen things the last couple of years where he's doing things first since Wilt Chamberlain, it made me think, well, maybe he is Wilt Chamberlain. He used to live in New York and play in Philadelphia and tell him, you want me to show up for the practices or the games? And that sounds like what Harden does when there's 2 days off between games. But that is on the organization, coaches, GMs, everybody, owners, for allowing that to happen.
Mina, does this strike you as an untenable position right now?
Yes. I mean, he's gone at some point, right? Like, the revelation, the most interesting revelation from today is the fact that he hasn't talked to the GM. Because all this other stuff about him being difficult to work with or exerting his leverage, that's not terribly surprising in a league where superstars have so much power. But going forward, they're going to have to move on. And they're going to also have to maximize the return. Like, we can talk about, oh, they should split ways. The Rockets, didn't succeed with him. It's time for this to end. James Harden is still one of the most valuable players in the league, right? So they need to make good until they can send him on his merry way and maximize their return. And that should be the concern of this organization right now.
All right, Bob Ryan, historically speaking, there have been players who have been, well, unhappy with their lot and wanting to be traded, and they have done all sorts of things to make that happen. You read this article today saying the organization's to blame for the position they're in right now. How do you consider it all?
Well, I was very interested in reading that story because I was unaware of some of those particulars. Mm-hmm. And I do think, though, if that's half of it's true, 3/4 of it's true, the rest of the league knows it too via the grapevine. So it's caveat emptor, whoever gets him. My feeling on James Harden is very simple. He's on his way to a 4th straight scoring title. I'll say that right now. He'll go to the Hall of Fame. He'll be able to make his speech. But he's a sideshow. He is not one of the great players, one of the great winning players of all time. He is a complete sideshow, an anomaly, an irrelevant factor in terms of winning and losing for the most part in this league. And that's the sum and substance of it. You dribble, step back, shoot, dribble, go to the basket. Oh, get breathed on, go to the free throw line. Who cares?
Woo! I mean, Bob Ryan, I respect everything you've ever said about the NBA. You're in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Does anyone think Bob's being a little bit too hard on Harden here? Blackistone, you?
I think a little bit too hard. I mean, I understand your lack of appreciation for that part of his game, but he's been as exciting a player to watch during his time playing this league as anyone. He's done things in this league that we haven't seen done before. The problem with James Harden right now is that the superstar treatment that he has been given within the franchise has not produced a trophy. Kawhi Leonard had special rules for him in Toronto. It produced a trophy. You look back at The Last Dance, Dennis Rodman, a role player, critical role player. There were rules for him, but it produced a championship, and that has not happened.
Mina Kimes, you look a little verklempt here after hearing Bob Ryan there.
I mean, he's one of the most dominant scorers in the history of the sport.
Bob knows that.
Obviously, yeah, but it doesn't sound like it. I understand that aesthetically you don't like his game. You're certainly not alone in that. But to categorize him as a sideshow, I think, is way out of line, like, given what he's capable of doing on the court.
Sideshow, I mean, Bob, could there be a team that could bring him back to what his ability certainly is to be the star and an apex predator in this league and a winning player? Could one team get something Houston hasn't been able to get out of him?
Perhaps some team in history that with the right coach and the right matching players, but not in the current game. Right. It's gone too far. We've all agreed it's gone too far. No, that ship sailed. He's out there. He's his own entity.
Then we'll give you the last word.
I lean toward Team Ryan. I mean, he's very difficult to play with. You got to plant 4 guys around the 3-point line and let him dribble till his heart's content. No other player forces a team into that sort of offense.
Wow, man. What happened to enjoy the art?
Truth to that.
What I mean, Tim Kalisha, everything you just said about James Harden, you like to dribble outside of the 3-point line, fire a few takes on this TV show, and then walk off the court on your off. Maybe you're the James Harden of the show.
Everybody's lawn
That's
right
a good
now.
question. Who is the James Harden of our panel? It's either Woody or Kalisha, and they're number 1, number 2 all-time wins.
No way.
Around the Horn is presented by Bullet Bourbon Frontier Whiskey, highly awarded high rye whiskey. Enjoy responsibly. Part of Happy